Hi, welcome to How Literature Can Save the World, where we explore the written word's impact on our culture and our relationships with ourselves, each other, and the environment. I'm your host, Michelle R. Brady. Grab a drink or a blanket or an animal to pet, and let's begin to make our lives more meaningful, one book at a time.
The trouble that mankind makes is that he thinks he's Italian, he's German, he's Spanish. We're all humans on this beautiful paradise is our earth.
Okay, so today we have Winter Miller, and I'm really excited. Obviously, you can tell I'm just very excited. Okay, but I am not as nervous as I normally am because now I've done quite a few of these and I can be like a human being, which is perfect for you.
Perfect. I'm excited too.
Winter is the managing editor of Electric Lit, which is actually two different publications. I don't know if everyone knows that, but it's the Commuter and Recommended Reading. And so before that, she served in other positions at the magazine, and then was also the managing editor of Forum Lit before that. And before all of those things, or possibly concurrently, I'll let us know. She practiced law and wrote and edited many academic articles. So you fill in everything I said wrong.
I think everything that you said is right, except we have more than two publications. We also have a creative nonfiction program,
Oh my
which I also did editing for. Everything else is accurate. I did not do law school at the same time as everything else because I'm not suicidal.
Wait, so you're like essentially managing three magazines right now?
Yeah, it's kind of strange because we're like an umbrella organization. So there's like Electric Lit, the organization, and then we have things happening under there like interviews and reading lists, and then narrative nonfiction. And then we have also additionally two weekly magazines, The Commuter and Recommended Reading.
Mhm.
So it gets kind of complicated when you're trying to talk about it, but it's not that complicated in practice.
Yeah. And then what about Lit Hub? Isn't that somehow associated with
Yeah.
Electric Lit or
It's founded by the same person,
okay.
which way predates me. Electric Light started in 2009, but they're in no way affiliated. So they were started by the same person, and I think that our logo is perhaps at the bottom of their website, but we don't interact or in any way affiliate at this point.
Um, so okay, we already kind of know like the steps you took, but I want to know about your road to where you are now, starting with baby Winter and not like how you did it, but why. Like why you chose to make the decisions you made, why you went to law school. And I know we've kind of touched on this, individually, but I think it's really interesting. And obviously, I have a shared interest in the law to literature road. So I just thought it would be cool to figure out like what made you change tactics, what made you try law in the first place, all of the things.
Yeah, I have a pretty a convoluted road. Do not do what I did. And a big part of that is that I didn't I always loved reading. I was a reader from a very small age, but I never really considered being a writer. I didn't know any writers growing up. My parents had very non-artistic jobs. It didn't even occur to me that it was an option. And so the other options, the things that I did consider, the things that would have made my parents very happy, were doctor or a lawyer,
Yeah.
and I was terrible at science, so lawyer it is. Um, I also really liked I say that kind of facetiously because I did really like I was a political science major,
Mhm.
and
And you
I
wrote
loved
about all kinds of medicine and stuff, so you definitely
yeah,
have a brain for it.
yeah.
That's why I
It's
chuckle.
definitely there exactly, yeah, there definitely is some overlap, and a lot of my interests kind of dovetail in interesting ways, but I ended up going to law school, and I had every intention of being a lawyer and practicing.
Mhm.
I loved law school. Everybody
Me
complains
too. I
about
loved
law
it too.
school.
I loved it so much.
I I loved it. Like I would, and so for that reason, I thought that I wanted to teach law because I was just like, okay, I'll camp out here. I don't need to leave law school. This is working for me. But that, as you may be aware, the path to becoming a professor of any kind, let alone at the graduate level, is kind of brutal. And so I knew that I would be in for it's called the meat market.
Oh my
the
god.
employment
I did
market
not.
for law professors. Yeah, so that gives you a sense of like it's very very brutal. And so I knew I would need to build up my resume and do a lot of things to like get my ducks in a row when I graduated. And so what I ended up doing first actually was so in law school, I kind of focused on disability law and bioethics.
Mhm.
And so post law school, I ended up doing a postdoctoral fellowship at NIH. They have one of the only bioethics departments in the country.
Which is so cool.
And yeah, it was a great experience. It was always time stamped, so it wasn't like a permanent position. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
So it gave me like some breathing room. But what I realized while I was there was that what I enjoyed most was writing and also, like, more importantly, editing other people's work. That was a big part of my job. I also realized that I did not like legal writing. And of course, that was everything that I was doing there.
Yeah.
And not for any particular reason except that it started to feel formulaic. Law review articles have a very set structure that you do not mess with. There are no adjustments, and if you follow it, you will succeed. And I started to feel kind of like suppressed by that. Like I couldn't actually be creative. And so I finished my fellowship and I moved to San Francisco, which is where my partner was living and where we live now. And I got a job in tech because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't anymore want to like go into law and be doing that kind of writing. So I got a job in tech for a medical startup company. So what I was doing there was a lot of medical editing. And I was bored. I was really bored.
I'm so glad you said that because I was like, if you say this was the best thing ever, and I was like, oh man.
Oh no, it paid so well, but it was terrible. I was really bored, and so I decided that like the thing that I was going to do to make it more interesting was I was going to start a creative writing program at this medical startup, and they let me do it
So
surprisingly.
cool.
Um, and it was so much fun. And it was a narrative nonfiction program with a focus on narrative medicine. So it was creative nonfiction, not fiction. My heart is now in fiction, but it was just I realized that the problem was law, not
Yeah.
writing it.
Yes.
Yeah. So at that point I ended up just I wasn't intending to leave Doximity. But I wanted to be more in the literary world. And so I applied for an internship at Electric Light. Actually, I started as a reader.
Oh my
So I read for them. Yeah, I read for them for a year and then I took an internship. Our internships are 3 months long. And I was planning to just do my 3 months and then they asked me to stay. So it ended up being a 6 month internship. And then I ended up staying like a year. Um, they kept asking me if I wanted to stay, and I did. I wanted to stay. And eventually that turned into other things. A number of things happened. One of my colleagues took medical leave. And so I stepped in and did her role. At the time, she was the books editor. So I was the interim books editor for a while. And then I was hired part time. And then I was hired full time. And then now I'm managing editor. And of course, throughout all of that, I did like a number of other creative writing things, like Forum Literary Magazine on the side. So it was a very very convoluted road. If you eventually want to do what I'm doing, I recommend get your MFA, but don't pay for it. But I do think that it gives you a real sense of the way this world kind of works. You get a sense of workshopping. You get a sense of like what fiction is doing, and even if you don't ultimately want to do that, MFA fiction also gets a lot of flack. It's good to know what the rules are so that you can break them.
So what's you mean it gets flack because it's like a cookie cutter, this is the way you write, this is what makes it good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone that comes out of an MFA program ends up writing the same MFA fiction. And I also don't think that that's true. I think that that's a an unfair and not holistic assessment of the MFA program. There are some great MFA programs that produce very creative and unusual writers. And also the other thing that I will say is if you are the type of person who needs a cash, and I am, that's law school, an MFA is a good option. You do not need an MFA
Yeah.
to work in publishing or to be a writer. You can definitely do it without that. But that is an easy direct path.
But do you think there's an argument that even if, the MFA doesn't produce cookie cutter writers, that it maybe molds someone's writing in a direction that isn't as original as it could have been? Or do you think that it generally will help because you get to have feedback from other people and all the other good things?
I think that generally it will help, but my caveat is that you need to do your research and choose the right program. All of the MFA programs have permanent staff.
Mhm.
So don't choose a program because you like the visiting writer.
Mm.
Choose a program because the writing of the person on the permanent staff is writing that you respect and that you would get something from.
That's a
If you end up in the wrong program, yeah, I think you'll feel stifled and you might feel that you have to change your writing.
I mean, I've only looked at the writing seminars because it's right here, but I like the idea that they study other languages and that they require poetry classes because I just feel like those things could really help elevate your vocabulary, which is, your building blocks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people start out. I'm thinking in particular of a writer who started out. She did her MFA in poetry, and then she ended up being a creative nonfiction writer. She wrote a memoir. Um, she's fantastic, actually. You would like her. She wrote The Two Kinds of Decay, which was her memoir, and now she writes novels. So I think that there's a lot of overlap in general, and most good programs will require you to take, classes outside of your selected genre, and most of them also have a translation requirement where you take a
Mm.
translation course.
So, I remember too, at one point you said you have a definition of literary fiction that you didn't want to bore me with. I
God,
don't know if you remember
seriously.
this because I said something like, I'm sure that there's an actual definition somewhere, but somebody people say that like literary fiction is really just about the structure, or if it's more metafiction, or if it's more theme based than plot based. And you wrote something to me that said, I have an opinion on this.
Got it. Okay. So I have an opinion, but my opinion is that there is not a definition of
Okay, I
literary
like that.
fiction, or there shouldn't be. Um, and I think what I mean by that, like there are things that you can say about literary fiction as compared to other genres that I think are true. So literary fiction tends to emphasize plot a lot less than genre fiction. It tends to invest more in character-driven narratives and character development. It tends not to have particular genre elements that are associated with a genre, although that's changing. There's a lot of, for instance, speculative literary fiction.
Which
But I think it's better if you're either a writer or a reader to just ignore labels like that, because what they're really for is for marketing
Yeah.
and for selling books. And I think they should matter a whole lot less to you as the writer or to you as the reader.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, because it really is just about finding the audience for it and not necessarily trying to, convert whatever it is that you're trying to do into something sellable or something that people can recognize. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. You should think about that, like where you are in your process. You should think about that later after you've written the book. And then I think it is really important because, like you said, you want the right readers to find your book. And genres are a very easy way to indicate, like, here is the type of book that you are looking at. If you like this type of book, you might like what you're holding in your hands.
Yeah.
So it's helpful in that way, but you should not think about it until you're where you are.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. My agent did say something about like that a substantial amount of people who don't like a book is because they thought it was going to be something that it wasn't. And most people aren't happy to have something that, some people are surprised and like, oh, this is great. I didn't have any expectation of this. But other people say, oh, I really want to read a mystery right now and I don't want to read a Western. And this turned out to be a Western. So I'm not happy.
I think that, yeah, I completely agree with that. Most readers are not interested in being surprised. They know what they like, and that's why they're picking up the book because they read romance novels. And if you give them, a horror book, that's not what they wanted to buy.
Yeah, especially because you're talking about somebody's time and their money. And those two things are pretty precious, especially I feel like now.
Well, yeah, and also the thing that I constantly forget is that I live in kind of a bubble where everyone is a reader that reads multiple books a year. And so if one book is not the right book or it's a bad book, it's okay because you're reading hundreds of other books during the year. But most people actually read fewer than 10 books a year. And so if it's a miss, that's like a real bummer.
Yeah.
That's a huge percentage of your reading and it's the wrong book.
Yeah, yeah, it's not just that though. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is because I feel like there might be people out there, especially with book banning, who are like, you know what? If it's so important to ban it, maybe there are some important things I can get from reading, or maybe I should try to do this, or maybe there's some ideas in there I didn't realize. And aside from just the curated list of here are the things that you're not supposed to read, and so you should want to, but I think that it could be challenging for someone to get into reading when there are so many books, especially with self-published authors. They have no idea where to begin, and it would be nice, like, for people like you've already mentioned a book, with about decay, which I think is very appropriate for me, and I think it's really cool to just hear about books that have changed other people and help them so that they have a place to start that's not gonna necessarily end in disappointment and giving up.
I do think that the standard curriculum for English classes growing up does a lot to kill people's love of reading. And so if you can find other outlets, although I don't envy teenagers today. There was no Amazon,
Yeah.
and like there was no really self-publishing. I'm sure there was, but I wasn't aware of it when I was growing up. So it felt less overwhelming. But most of the books that I loved, I did not read in school. And I think you kind of have to like actively look for those. I optimistically like to believe that everybody who doesn't like reading just hasn't found the right book yet.
Well, you know what? Let's go there. So, during childhood, what are these books that you found outside of school, and how did you find them?
Oh God. Okay. I think the first book that I ever loved, and I put some thought into this because you told me in advance that this is what I should think about. And I love nothing if not an assignment. I think the book that made me realize that I was a reader and that I actually liked reading was Frog and Toad. Um, that book is fantastic. It does not get enough credit as a children's book. If you haven't read it, even if you're an adult, I cannot. It's one of the great loves of my life, Frog and Toad. But it was one of those experiences where I was supposed to be sleeping and I was under my covers with a flashlight. And that's just, you can't replicate that experience. Although I guess maybe children now are doing it with their Kindle, which makes me sad. But that was a gift. I think it was a Christmas gift. It wasn't something that I found in school. And as soon as that happened, I was just I was a voracious reader. So of course I read everything that they gave me in school, but I also needed more. And I like lived at the bookstore. My poor mother, I also thought that I needed to own every book that I read.
Me too.
Yeah, I don't know. I did not become a library person until much later in my life. And now
I didn't wanna give them back. I felt like I wanted to.
I didn't want to give them back. Yeah, but I also didn't reread them. I just like wanted to have them.
Well, you know what?
Uh
It's like a visual representation of what exists in your mind now. Like, all of these books, like, I'm looking at a bunch of books. All of these books are also inside me. I kinda like that.
yeah. Yeah, I like the visual representation, and also they were far less accessible
Mm.
in other formats
Yeah.
too. But I yes, so I most of the books I read were outside of school, which is not to say that like there weren't books that I loved in school. And I basically found books by asking the adults in my lives, usually my friends' parents, what they were reading, and then they would give me books that were inappropriate that I loved.
Yeah.
I remember reading, and this is still one of my favorite novels. It's a great novel. It's called White Oleander
Oh, I
by
know that
Janet
one.
Fitch. Yes. I love that book, and my friend's father gave it to me when I was in 6th grade.
Oh my god.
I should not have been reading the things that were happening in that book, and I remember my English teacher because I was reading it in class, which was probably not a good idea, but my English teacher came up and she was like, "Are you reading that?" And I was like, "Yeah."
No, I'm just holding.
"Oh, okay." Yeah, she's like, "That's a pretty adult book. Where did you get that?" And I just remember thinking like, "Yes, it is.
Yes,
And I love it, and I'm gonna
you're
keep
right.
looking for these." It made me feel very adult. And so at that point, I think I started like actively looking for quote unquote adult books.
Yeah, I read Agatha
Um,
Christie, and I felt like I was I was like, "Oh, it seems weird that everybody's dying all the time," 'cause I didn't quite grasp that that was, like, the whole point. Like, I mean, it's not, like, sexual, but still.
yes, very very good genre fiction. But yeah, I think that, and that's what I mean by like straying from the curriculum. I could
Yeah.
not encourage that more.
So, but none of the books that you read in school were like, what about, like, One Flew and I don't know, all of them. Like, you didn't like any of them, or you just weren't into them?
I mean, It's not that I didn't like any of them. There were a lot of books. Most of what I can remember are the books that I hate, right? Because those are
Yep.
the ones that like stand out in your mind. Like they made us read Catcher in the Rye. And I hated that book.
Yeah.
I continue to hate that book. It's not that I don't like classics though, because some of my favorite novels are classics. I just didn't. They weren't assigned to me in school.
Yeah. What
Um,
about,
I
like,
haven't
Over
read
the
one.
Stars and The Giver when you were, like, young, those 2 are pretty damn good, and they're by the same woman, which I didn't realize till my daughter was reading.
Yes, Louis Lowry.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, how could I not have known this all these years?"
Yes. I mean, I loved books like that. I loved, Island of the Blue Dolphins.
Oh,
Did
yeah.
you ever read that?
Oh, good.
I loved books like that, and, my 5th grade teacher assigned The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin,
I've never
and that remains one of my favorite books. That book is fantastic. So there were books that I liked, but there were also, Catcher in the Rye. There was a lot of Shakespeare in high
Oh,
school, which
yeah.
I yeah, which I could not get into. We read Siddhartha.
Oh,
They
I
did
love
a
Siddhartha.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh, these are the
I
bad
did
ones.
This is the one that I remember yet. It was not good. I remember feeling very, very bored.
But it's so short. I really like a short book. I don't know what it is about it. I just really like that they're, like, to the point. "Here's the thing that happened. We're done now." Like
Yes, I really like that now. It took me a long time. Actually, one of the books on my list when you said books that change your life
Mm.
is a novella because it's the book that made me realize that, oh, I do like novellas.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was so good. But for a long time I thought that I wanted like a proper novel. And if it was not a proper novel, then I was just kind of skeptical that I was gonna enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I will say this though. I remember, feeling really sad when books would end. And so when I was young, like in high school and probably the beginning of college, I would try to get the longest books possible because I just never wanted them to end because I guess I just felt really lonely or something like pathetic like that. But I remember when Little Women, which wasn't one of the longer ones, I don't recall, but it would end and I was like, "Oh, I can't have them back and they're gone." Wait, so you write a lot, but do you ever write just for fun? I know you don't write fiction really, right? Is that the case?
I actually only write fiction.
Where is it?
For fun.
Just
I don't want it to be published.
Oh.
But I do a lot of writing solely for myself and for pleasure. I have like a drawer of writing, but I identify much, much more as an editor. So I think that that's the part of me that is usually publicly visible.
I am so impressed by people who write, like, truly for themselves, and I know a lot of us say that we write for ourselves, and I think we all get something out of it, but on the other hand, like, publishing is pretty performative, and it's cool to do that. I mean, t you just wanna write. That's pretty cool. I didn't even know that about you.
Well, I mean, to be clear, there's absolutely no indication that I'm good at writing. And so, but
Of
I think
course you're
that
good at it.
not
My
to-
god.
but also, I think that there's something to be said for one, I think publishing is incredibly brave. I don't know how all of you manage to write while you're thinking about an audience,
It
right?
kinda has its own problems, though, when you think about it, because it's like, "Oh, this isn't entertaining to the reader," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's because I had no concern for that at all."
Well, that's what editing is for.
I guess. You
You know.
know about that, but I'm terrible at editing. Okay, wait. So, can you keep talking about all the different books? I mean, it doesn't have to just be childhood, like, all of it. And I actually have a separate question, sorry. I know this is compound and therefore difficult to answer, but I wanna start with I was thinking about books that kind of explain the law because I loved going to law school just like you, and I love learning about, like, the 2 sides of every issue and how you know that intellectually, but you can really see it once you have to, get into somebody else's shoes and see where they're coming from, and I have always looked for books that I felt like kind of portrayed that just the feeling of having I don't know, having dispute resolution arbitrated by, somebody who knows what they're doing, but not in a legal context, like, not like books that are about the law, but books that sort of embody that, and I know that I'm saying some kind of, like, very amorphous, weird things, but is there any book you've ever read that kind of made you feel like this is what being a lawyer is like?
I'm not thinking of very many examples out of hand. I will say that uh, the book that is coming to mind is a wonderful book. It wasn't initially on my list, but it's so, so good. I highly recommend. It's called The Course of Love
Hmm.
by Alain I'm going to probably mispronounce his name. he's French, Alain de Botton, I think. It's about two people in a relationship, but the way that it is um, examined is from a third person omniscient point of view.
Yeah.
And just kind of unpacks their relationship from each of their perspectives in a really almost like psychoanalytic direct way. And you get a real sense of, okay, this is what this character thinks is happening.
Yeah.
And this is what the other character thinks is happening. And they're both true. And they're both different.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Like things can be completely opposite and both be equally true. So that's an example maybe that fits.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm looking for something that shows that two sides of a story can be true, and then the decision about, which is better or worse is really all about values, and there's no right or wrong, it's up to the people to decide,
Mhm.
what they think is most important. But tell me all of the other things.
I actually think I think what you just said though is really interesting, which is that you're like trying to find books that essentially accept gray area.
Yeah.
And I think that children's books and to a certain extent YA are like that genre is not necessarily built on that belief. There's a lot of like morality. And I wonder if that's why, even as a child, I gravitated towards adult books. Even now, I'm in a couple of book clubs, and there'll be a book that everyone loves that I hate.
Mhm.
And when we get down to like why it is that Winter hated this book, it's almost always that I feel like they were trying to teach me a lesson, and I don't want to be giving a lesson. I want to feel like I'm taking something from the book as a reader rather than being spoon fed the author's morality, if
Oh,
that
I
makes sense.
totally get that. Yeah, you're like, this isn't an op-ed, like I know what I'm
Yeah.
getting when I sign up for that.
I don't I don't need a lesson from you. This isn't school. Like I'm reading fiction for myself.
I feel like what you're saying is the difference between somebody having an agenda and somebody openly exploring an issue and just seeing what comes of
Exactly.
it, and maybe not even knowing what comes of it at the end, but people can decide what they wanna take from it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe the best writers, it's not that they don't have an agenda, but it's that they don't make the reader feel that they have an agenda. Like they're doing a good enough job focusing on the story
Mm.
that the agenda is something that happens naturally.
But
And you can really tell when the writer is focusing on their agenda.
no, you totally can, but here's the problem. What is obvious to you might be too subtle for someone else. And so how do you, like, find that balance, between somebody or most people not getting it to hitting them over the head with it?
I mean, that is such a careful balance. I think it really depends on I mean, here's the thing. Like at the end of the day, you are not going to make everyone happy. And so you're going to give your book to hopefully 100 people before it sees the light of day. And you cannot please them all.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think is great about an
So hard.
MFA in the workshop experience because you'll take your piece to workshop and you'll be told, I really, really liked this scene. This
Mhm.
scene did so much for character development. And then someone else in the group will be like, actually, I think that that's the worst scene in the entire story and you need to take it out.
Yeah.
And it just gives you like a crash course in realizing that you need to write the book that you want to write. You need to keep your reader in mind, but you need to also accept that this will not be the book for every reader. You cannot please everyone. And so my advice always is to imagine the reader that you want to have and then trust them. I think readers are a lot smarter than writers give them credit for. And so when you start like over explaining, that's when things get clunky. And that's when the reader starts to feel like you're like leading them by the hand. I was just on a panel with a bunch of other magazine editors. And one of the questions that the audience asked was, what are you looking for
Oh,
when you're reading a piece of work? The one thing that everybody agreed on and like kind of came to was what we're looking for is confident writing. A writer who you feel like they know what they're doing and you're happy to follow them because they're writing so confidently, you trust that they'll take you where you need to go.
yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I don't know if you're ready for this, but I would like to talk about your editorial services. And this is not a thing that you were doing to plug. This is a thing that I'm trying to do to plug you. You are incredible. And at this point, I should also mention that the reason I met Wynter was because she helped me on the manuscript that was, I mean, it's 1,000 versions ago, but the book that I now have an agent for, and your thoughts and feedback were incredibly beneficial to me, and they did crush my soul briefly, but they were in such a happy and, like, upbeat way, and also, like, with so much energy and hope that I was just like it was like the nicest I don't know, it's like being told that none of your clothes fit, but you look good anyway, you know? Like, something like that, but
What a beautiful analogy, Michelle. I love that.
but so will you talk about, anything that you wanna talk about with that or what you're looking for?
I mean, it's such a relief to hear you say that, both that I crushed your soul and that you continued writing, because that is like, as an editor, that is the thing that I most worry about. And so what I'm initially thinking about, as you were talking, was one of the things. A part of my job right now, is that Electric Lit runs. You know this. I think you're an Electric Lit member. Electric Lit runs a membership program, and as part of the membership, what you're paying for is tailored feedback on your submissions. Because if you submit as a general submitter, you go to slush and you get a rejection that's template,
Right.
because there are thousands of pieces and we can't possibly give individual feedback to everyone. So we have this program where if you're willing to pay for it, you get individualized feedback. So a big part of my job is giving that feedback. Um, and I am, as a person, something that I struggle with personally is that I am very blunt, and I tend to be very direct. And when you're writing an email to somebody who has poured their heart and soul into a story, you have to find a way to communicate both that this isn't working, and that's not fatal. You should keep working on the story, and I'm going to be telling you things that are hard to hear, but hear them with an open mind, take them with a grain of salt, use what's helpful. And I think that a lot of writers get feedback so infrequently,
Yeah.
because most of the time you're just like submitting into the ether, that they get my email and it feels like, oh, this is the only feedback I'm getting and it's negative feedback and therefore I shouldn't be a writer.
Yeah, but you also
Um,
put good stuff in there.
yes, well, hopefully, yeah. But I think the other thing too that I struggle with is in these contexts, I only have so much space, and I want to be giving them the feedback about the things that they need to fix,
Right.
rather than the thing that's working. Because the thing that's working, they don't need to work on. And so I do try to um, give praise where praise is due. But I think that that's a real skill and something that I initially struggled with, which is like how to deliver bad feedback. And so I very much want it to be feedback that makes you feel terrible at first, but then when you sit with it, you realize that it's actually an opportunity. And your manuscript was a pleasure to work on because there are so many possibilities. Like the worst possible thing is to read something and to feel like there's no way this could work. I don't even know what to tell this writer. Like they need to stop. You need to write something else.
Yeah.
So seeing something and feeling like I cannot wait to sit down for an hour with Michelle because I have so goddamn much to say. That's like the best feeling. So I'm glad that that went well in our case.
I felt like a freight train had hit my face. But it was so helpful. You're exactly right. All of those things were true. That's exactly what happened. I struggled in the moment because I don't know what I expected, but I struggled in the moment. But then what I really left with was a feeling that you understood what I was trying to do. And I think that that's the most important part, right? Like if you can tell what the writer is attempting, then you can help them get there if possible. And I think it's tougher though if I would imagine, I don't know, I'm not a great editor, but it would be tough if you don't know what the goal is, I think. I think that would be more difficult.
Yeah. And I sometimes start consultations with this question, which is like, what are you trying to do here? Because if I know that, then I can help. That'll give me a lens to look at your manuscript with, and we can get from A to B. I think usually when I don't know what the author is doing, and when I sit down and I'm like, and the author is walking away feeling like I didn't understand what they were trying to do, and I'm feeling like I didn't understand, like 98% of the time, it's because the writer hasn't figured out yet
Yeah.
what it is that they're trying to do. And so, like, when you ask them that direct question, if their response is not an immediate, I'm trying to do this, then that's a problem.
Right.
And I think that sometimes authors don't realize that that's the case until after the thing is written and somebody else who's not inside their brain is reading it.
Yeah, yeah, or yeah, and that's another thing about, like, just setting it down, and I'm the worst at this because I am so impatient, but you put that thing away, And when you read it again, you will have forgotten some of the things that you were trying to do a little bit, and you will see what somebody else who is reading it for the first time would not understand. I mean, you won't even see all of it, and I think that's even more of an indication is that you can only see some stuff that they wouldn't get, and you know intuitively there must be more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you need to have a starting place about like, I think that this is what I'm trying to do. And then the wonderful thing about giving it to somebody who is not you is that both you can figure out whether or not what you're trying to do is actually happening on the page.
Yeah.
And then also sometimes in, a beautiful scenario, they'll see something that you weren't even trying to do, but it's great and it's happening on the page and you didn't know that you were trying to do it
Yeah.
until it's pointed out. And I think those are wonderful moments for a writer where they're like, I didn't even think that. I mean, and what this brings us to, I think, is the best advice I have, which is that like never send something out that only you have read to a lot of people because you can't be your own editor and you just will never see what there is to see if it's just you looking at it.
Yeah, and I would also add to that there are different levels, and there are huge differences in the kinds of reading you'll get from different kinds of people. Like, your friends and family might not be the best people if they don't read all the time, and I was on a critique exchange thing where, you read somebody else's work and then they read yours, and it's just there's so many different kinds of writers at different stages that sometimes some of the feedback really wasn't very helpful, and then, alternatively, if you don't have writing friends, it's gonna cost money, like, it really will.
This is such a great point. I mean, and I think is the overwhelming problem for probably all writers is finding readers who will both take it seriously and be willing to do it for free.
Mhm.
That is one of the great things about an MFA program is that everybody's reading everybody's work and all of you are there for your MFA.
Mm.
So it's people who care about it and are taking it seriously. Um, you may have a different family in mind. I would never give my work to my family. I'm not going to be able to hear what they have to say. They're not going to be able to read what I've written. And I think you're raising a very important point because I kind of said broadly, never send your work out unless a lot of people have read it. That doesn't mean that you should listen to everything that your readers are saying. I think you just made a great point. Like sometimes either it's the wrong reader for your work or it's somebody who didn't read it with an open mind, or for whatever reason, there's a thousand reasons why what they said is not something you should listen to. And so you'll get a sense of that.
You're right, and I think it just takes time, right? Like, it just takes time and being out there and getting a little bit more resilient when it comes to feedback generally, and then you can kind of start to separate the things that are gonna be helpful and the things that aren't. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? I don't wanna rush you, but and I wanna hear any book recommendations because you are, like, the perfect person.
I have an actual list for you because you asked me to make some book recommendation. And your specific request, I think, was things that are not necessarily mainstream or that people haven't already read.
Mhm.
So I tried to keep that in mind, and I only have, I think, one classic on here. It's a classic that doesn't get nearly enough credit, and it deserves to be on here. It's maybe the best book I've ever read. So I'm keeping it, even if it's mainstream. Um, okay, so the first book that I'm going to recommend, I actually mentioned earlier. It's the novella that made me realize that I love novellas. It's called The Strangers,
Mhm.
and it's by John Bilbao. And actually, I read it with my partner, and he also loved it. And he said, "Make sure you know how to pronounce that man's name before you say it on the podcast." And I didn't, so hopefully I pronounced it correctly. It's in translation, and it's incredible. It's from a very small press, and it's perfect. It's a perfect novella.
Oh my gosh, people should take
Uh,
note of this. She's saying that this thing is perfect. This is what you start with.
it's so good. It's so so good. I loved it. The classic is Transit of Venus by
Mm.
Shirley Hazard. And when I recommend this book to writers, I tell them I read it and it convinced me that I will never be a writer of this caliber. Like the writing is so beautiful that even if you are not interested in story, and you will be because the writing is good, like on a line level, I think it's the best writing I've ever read. Okay, let's see. Three more. Nicole Krauss is a pretty well known writer for her book, The History of Love.
Mhm.
That's like the book that she got famous for, but it is not her best book. Her best book is called Great House. And it is a great example of a novel that is not structured like a novel. I would never call it a novel in stories, but it's much closer to that than a novel. And it's fabulous and beautiful. It's built on the idea of a story being like a house, and it revolves around a desk, a writing desk, and all of the different threads in this story somehow touch that desk. And it's just the construction of it is fabulous. It's great to read just on a craft level.
That's awesome.
And then let's see the last one. Well, I could go on forever. I think I recommended The Dark Dark to You by
Mhm.
Samantha Hunt.
You
That's
did?
a short story collection that yeah, anybody who will listen, I'm like, read The Dark Dark by Samantha Hunt. It's so good.
Yeah, it is actually really good.
And she's a well-known writer, but I think that that collection doesn't get nearly enough publicity. Okay, what is the last one? Fever Dream is another book in translation, and another novella by Samantha Schweblin. In that book, I'm not a horror reader. It's literary fiction, but it's gripping and terrifying and does what I think everyone should be trying to do with tension
Mhm.
on the page. She builds tension so beautifully. That book I read in a single sitting. It was so good. I could not pull
Those are
myself
my
away from it.
favorites.
So those are books that have changed my life.
That's awesome. That's, like, super helpful, so I'm very grateful for that.
That's always what I want to know whenever I'm talking to anyone is what are you reading? So when that request comes to me, I'm like, you know what? I'm ready.
What have I not asked you that you were prepared to talk about and or want to talk about as we say goodbye?
God. I think that we've covered it all. Something that I'm thinking about based on our conversation is just this thing that you mentioned about how difficult it is to find people to read your work. And I would just like encourage, like, I think that a lot of people don't have the flexibility or the financial means to go out and pay for editorial services or to enroll in an MFA program. And I think that there are a lot of people like that. And given that that's the case, that means that there are a lot of people out there that you could possibly be connecting with
Mm.
and forming a writing group with. And I think just like never underestimate like how easy it is to get into this world socially. I'm an introvert, and so it's very, very difficult for me to like feel motivated to go to a reading
Me too.
or to reach out to a writer that I like or another reader. But I think that the dividends of doing those types of things are enormous. So as somebody who hates socializing, I would encourage other people to just like this, like something like this. If someone wants to talk to you on a podcast, say yes.
Yeah.
Uh, and connect with other writers. I know that you are also having a similar experience because you mentioned that that's one of the things that you're really appreciating from having a podcast, but just like making the time to talk to people about writing and reading, I think makes a huge difference, and it makes the project of writing less lonely because it's pretty lonely work.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It makes me feel like I'm not the only one trying to figure all these things out and that there are other people interested in the things that I'm interested in and just out there reading books.
Exactly, and also the feeling that just, like I mean, for me, over here on the West Coast, it can sometimes feel like New York is the nexus for all reading and writing, and that's just not the case.
No,
I think
I get that.
getting involved in, like, your local bookstore or your local library, I don't know what other libraries are like across the country, but I found out that our library system here actually has, like, a schedule of writing groups
Oh,
that are drop-in, and if that's something that is regularly available, that's wonderful. Would encourage doing that.
thank you so much for listening. Until next time, and in the words of my daughter,
Let's hip hop our way out.